Hey gang, welcome back. It's Dr. B, the Chemie. And so today what we're gonna do is I wanna show you how to use a spectrophotometer and briefly explain how this thing works. The really nice thing about a spectrophotometer is that it's an easy means of collecting data and making measurements for samples with particular concentrations of a colored solution or a solution with a species that will absorb a wavelength. So for us, we've got this spectrophotometer, and for a photographer who wants to come on down and take a look. And so with the spectrophotometer, we've got this interface, and depending on the model that you have, you may have different interfaces. That's okay. Normally with any spectrophotometer, what will happen is that you'll be able to change some of the features such as the wavelength. So in this case, we're going to enter and we're going to use our scroller arrows to go to measurement. And so from here, what we'll do is we're going to change it to whatever wavelength we like. In today's video, we're going to work with green food coloring. And so for green food coloring happens to absorb very well at 627. So we're going to adjust it using these side arrows. And once we get 627, we're going to hit enter. We'll go home. And then we are now almost ready to go. And so today we've got a couple of samples, and when you're collecting samples for your spectrophotometer, what you'll do is you're gonna have one of these cuvettes, and with the cuvette, you notice that there's one side that's got a diamond on it, and then the other sides do not. And you might see that there's two regular plain sides. Normally for us, what we're gonna do is the side that's got the diamond on it, when we look at the spectrophotometer, that's gonna be on the left-hand side, and then the plain sides are going to be perpendicular to that. And the reason why is because when you have the spectrophotometer in operation, you have light that's going to come in from the left and then come out on the right. And what's happening within the spectrophotometer with that light is that light's going to be entering at a particular intensity, and then as it goes through your sample, the sample will absorb some of that light so that the light intensity exiting the sample will have a decreased light intensity. And so your spectrophotometer can measure the changes in light intensity, and that's what tells us the absorbance. So the higher the absorbance, it means that there was more light being absorbed by your sample, and then there's a lower light intensity coming out. So for us, I've got a couple of samples. So we've got some water, and we've got some green food coloring. And with these cuvettes, we're gonna pop them in, we'll get some measurements, just to show you how that spectrophotometer works. Now, in some situations, when you put your sample into the spectrophotometer or into a cuvette, what will happen is you might get an air bubble, as you see over here. In those situations, you want to make sure you get rid of those air bubbles because that can mess with your measurement. So what you can do is you can just tap your cuvette on the bottom or tap it on a surface, and as you see, you're able to get rid of that air bubble, which is wonderful. Now, as I said before, we're going to take the diamond side, we're going to put on the left as we face the spectrophotometer. Now I'm going to open up our chamber. I'm going to pop that spectrophotometer in. Going to go to close. We're going to enter. We're going to now scroll all the way down to go. We're going to hit enter again, and we are going to now let it read. And as you see right now, the spectrophotometer is reading, and this one in particular will just continuously read until we freeze the display. And so what you see here is that the cuvette with just water in it has a absorbance of 0.08. So that's the contributions from the cuvette with the water. And that's always a good number to know, so that when you take your regular sample that has water and the cuvette, you can then later subtract out that base information or that base value, so you get the proper absorbance reading and contribution from your sample. So we're going to do this again, and now we're going to take our green food coloring, and like I said before, diamond's going to be on the left-hand side. We're going to open up our chamber again, pop our sample in. Okay, and I'm going to press the enter button now so that my spectrophotometer will read. Okay, and as you're letting the spectrophotometer run, you'll probably you want to wait until it gets to an absorbance value that's either the same or it's hovering around a small set of values. So if you notice that the hundredths are slightly changing ever so often, that's a good time that you can just freeze the display and use your judgment on what's the most appropriate value to use. And so as you see with the green food coloring, we had an absorbance of 1.28, indicating that yes, that green food coloring is absorbing quite a bit. And so what you can do with the spectrophotometer is you can play around a bit, you can change those concentrations of your sample. And what's nice about the spectrophotometer is that there's, in low absorbance values between 0 and 1, there generally is a linear relationship between concentration and your absorbance. And so for you, what you can do with a spectrophotometer is make a calibration curve where you have a collection of samples of known concentrations, and you can get the corresponding absorbances. And by knowing those corresponding absorbances, you can plot on the y-axis absorbance and on the x-axis concentration. And once you have your calibration curve, you can now use that in identifying concentrations of unknown samples with your chemical species. So that's everything on the spectrophotometer. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.